Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. One of the situations I've been talking about and telling Browns fans to just keep an eye on, right? Not don't get your hopes up, don't get your expectations too high. Don't think that it's destined to happen, but keep your eye on this situation. You might want to monitor it. Is the Matt Stafford situation in Los Angeles. There has been noise about those two parties breaking up this offseason pretty consistently, right? It started with questions about Matt Stafford. Is he going to retire or not? Then Matt Stafford let it be known he was not considering retirement. He's pretty sure he's going to play. And then the Rams kind of like questioning whether Matt's going to come back and be their quarterback next year for whatever reason. Now, on the surface, that didn't make much sense. Matt had 2 years left on his contract. Why would there be a question on if he's going to be the quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams going forward? But what this seems to be about is I think the Rams feel like they have maxed out what they can do with Matt Stafford at this point. And they won a championship with him, right? But Aaron Donald's not here anymore. They did not do a great job of drafting. So they have what they have around it. They can make the playoffs, but they feel like they've maxed out. And I don't think they would mind moving off of him. Now, I don't think they have to move off of Matt. I think they'd be fine keeping Matt, but I think they'd be fine moving off of him. And that's what made me question, hey, is this something that the Browns could get in on, right? Now we get the report that the Rams are allowing Matt Stafford to have conversations with other teams. Now, what does this mean? The way that it's been reported by Tom Pelissero is think of this more like a transition tag, like what the Ravens did with Lamar Jackson when they were having contract negotiations with him, more than it is about like Matt Stafford's truly on the open market in the way that like Deshaun was or Russell was in 2022. I hate to bring back those memories, but that's the closest or most related situation I could think of when it comes to quarterback. So it's more similar to that. What I think the Rams are trying to figure out is, what can we get for Matt Stafford? In a way, it's kind of a preview of what could happen with Myles Garrett. Because the next step, if the Browns feel like there is no impasse with Myles, right? No ability to make amends with Myles Garrett and get him to sign an extension, eventually, whether it be late this offseason or early next offseason, the next step in the Myles Garrett Brown saga is this, where the Browns say, okay, find us a trade. We don't want to trade you. We have not been impressed with any of these offers that we've heard. Find us a trade. Here's what we want. If you can find us this, we might move you, right? Or let's see what the price is. This is what that is, right? Basically a transition tag, but for a trade, where the Rams are trying to figure out what is the market value for Matt Stafford. What can they get for Matt Stafford? I heard somebody say that you could throw a first-round pick and get him. I'm sure you could, but I don't think that's the proper value for Matt Stafford. I think maybe a late second, early third is probably the centerpiece of whatever deal that ends up being for Matt Stafford. And it's also kind of a negotiation strategy from the Rams where they're saying to Matt Stafford and Matt Stafford's people, okay, you're not happy here right now. Go see what you can find somewhere else and see if you would be happy in your mind going to these places where you might be able to get traded to, right? It's basically like daring Matt Stafford to find a trade. We'll see, right? But I think that's what the Rams want to get. They want to figure out what the market value is so they can make the determination, hey, is getting whatever we would get for Matt Stafford. Let's say the market gets crazy for him and you can get a first, then I think the Rams would be likely to move off of him if it's going to be for a first. Or is this going to be a situation where Matt looks out there at the options, isn't really satisfied with any of the teams that are willing to make a move for him, and decides, hey, let me just renegotiate my contract with the Rams and see if that can help them be more competitive. Because I think that's what the Rams want out of Matt. I think they want Matt to renegotiate his contract. So that's what my read is on that situation. I've been talking about it for a while. I don't think we're at the point where you could say it's imminent that he's going to be traded, but it is more likely that he is going to get traded than it was a week ago, right, before this news had broke. It was always something, though, that was simmering under the surface in Los Angeles, which brings us to the Cleveland Browns portion of this. Look, I have said this before. I will continue to say this. Matt Stafford being your starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns is the absolute best case scenario for this football team going forward. Like, especially if you can get him for a price tag that's fair. And that's the biggest part here, right? Can you get Matt Stafford without having to give up number 2? Can you get Matt Stafford without having to give up number 33? I think those two picks to me, untouchable, right? Because part of bringing in Matt Stafford and why he's the best case scenario to me is because he gives you a chance to win now, but still allows you to use the assets that you accumulate, the key assets that you accumulated from being 3 and whatever you were last year, to make your team better in the long run. So you get some balance there. You get some position players to make you better in the long run and the short term. You got a quarterback this year, and then you get the freedom to do with quarterback however you feel fit in 2026 or 2027. Because you have the security of a quarterback. Hell, you could draft a quarterback here that you felt like might have been more of a project, right? Or maybe you like Will Howard and you don't just want to start him, right? You want to work on some of his mechanics to get his arm a little bit stronger, so you don't want to start him right away. But you can have Matt Stafford play for a year or two and then put in Will Howard or whoever it is your developmental quarterback of choice in this draft. Hell, you could do this. I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't be a fan of it, but you could still trade for Matt Stafford and then draft like a Cam Ward thinking, hey, we're going to develop him over time. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it, but if you're asking me what the best case scenario at starting quarterback is for the Cleveland Browns, it's realistic. It always points back to Matt Stafford because he is significantly better than Kirk Cousins. He is very experienced with what the Browns want to do offensively. He is a quarterback who has played in the elements, not at home in Detroit, obviously, but still had to go on the road against Chicago in the NFC South for years. He had to go on the road against Green Bay in the NFC South for years, and I think even a few years when the Vikings were playing outdoors at the University of Minnesota because they were building that new dome. He had to play outside there. Plenty of experience in the elements. Right, I know that's something that Browns fans are always concerned about when we go for a quarterback. Can this guy play in the elements? Well, Matt Stafford can play in the elements. He's done it. He's the guy that had a 300-yard performance in the elements versus the Philadelphia Eagles, a defense that was so good they won the Super Bowl. So still a guy who could deal with those elements, very experienced in those elements, has the skill set you would desire at quarterback. We've seen Kevin be very successful with this style of quarterback. Matt Stafford would be the best version of that he's gotten to work with in his offensive coordinator / head coach career. The fit would be obvious. This is the obvious best case scenario to me. Even if you're somebody who wants to draft a quarterback at 2, this is the obvious best case scenario. I also think it'd be interesting, right? What does trading for Matt Stafford do to this Myles Garrett situation? Because we just talked about it, right? The next step for Myles Garrett's situation is unironically what Matt Stafford's going through right now, where the Browns say, hey, go find a trade. We'll see. We'll report back to me what you find. Go find a trade, and then we'll tell you if we want to do it or not, right? That's basically where the Rams are, where they're trying to figure out what the value is for Matt Stafford in the trade market. And they're trying to stir it up and create a market here. But if you get Matt Stafford, that might delay Myles Garrett's trade request for a couple of years. Now, I have I'm just going to be honest. I think Myles is going to play somewhere else regardless of what you do. Like, I think you can land on a franchise quarterback this year. It's obvious that guy's a franchise quarterback, and Myles still might want to see what happens in free agency. Like, I think part of him wants to play somewhere else. That's just the vibe I get. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I hope I'm wrong on that. Like, I would be glad to be wrong on that. But the vibe I get is I think he gets cold feet about the ideal of staying in one organization for his entire career, and he wants to play somewhere else, which, fair enough, right? That's what free agency's for. But yeah, I don't know if this gets Myles to be a Brown forever, but it might get Myles to stay on the team until he's 35 or 33 or something like that. And at that point, if you lose Myles, it's not as devastating as losing him in the middle of his prime. So that might secure the prime of Myles Garrett. I don't know if it secures the entire career, but it secures the prime of Myles Garrett, or at least it gives you a better chance at securing that. That is why Matt Stafford is the best case scenario. But the thing you have to balance with Matt Stafford being the best case scenario is the price has to be right? If you have to factor in the second pick overall, it does not become best case scenario anymore, right? If you have to sacrifice 33, it does not become best case scenario to me because it's giving up way too much. But if it's anything after that, if you can get creative and put Greg Newsome in a trade with 68, yeah, that's fine, right? I'm not saying you don't give up something useful. You're going to have to give up a day 2 pick for somebody like Matt Stafford, and possibly a young player on a rookie deal like Greg Newsome. But if you get Matt Stafford in return and you get to hold on to 2 and 33, I think long-term you could come out ahead on that pretty easily. So that's the balance that you have to go into this thing with. I hope if the Browns are interested in Matt, and I hope they are, which I think they would be. I think they have to look at every option possible at this point. Like, I want them on interviews with Cam. I want them on interviews with Shador. I want them figuring out what the value is. Like, I want them poking their nose in every quarterback situation possible because Browns should be interested in every quarterback situation possible to hopefully find a solution. But they also have to balance, okay, if we could get Matt Stafford, that'd be best case scenario, but the price does matter, right? So we can't overpay. And I'm just talking about when it comes to trade assets. You want to pay Matt Stafford a bunch of guaranteed money but keep his cap number low, I could care less. That's Jimmy Haslam's money. Like, do what you need to do to secure the deal financially. There are questions, right? I know Matt Stafford's wife is a big part of this whole thing. I tend to tell people this all the time. Y'all be overreacting to this stuff whenever it comes out here, right? Like, I remember people did this with like Sierra and Russell Wilson, and people were like, Russ is never going to play in the Midwest because Sierra don't want to live in the Midwest. And the reality is, when you have made as much money as Russell Wilson and Matt Stafford has made throughout their career, wherever they're playing, unless it's literally in Los Angeles or New York or Florida, is not where they're living. So I know people are like, well, Mrs. Stafford would never allow this to happen. Like, it doesn't matter where Matt Stafford plays this season. Matt Stafford will be living in a condo that he rents out for a year or two somewhere in Cleveland during the years of the season. And he will be flying back whenever he can to LA to be with his family, right? Like, his family's going to be in LA regardless of where he plays this year. He could play in Green Bay for all people. Like, it does not matter where he plays. So I think people kind of factor that part into it too much. That's not going to be a huge factor in this decision because Matt's not likely to live wherever he wants to play. And they live in LA right now and they want to leave LA. So they've already had the conversation. It's fine if he lives somewhere else during the regular season. So wherever that is, I don't think matters as much. But I think people in Cleveland are just going to naturally try to talk themselves out of it because it feels like one of those things that we never get to have happen here. But it is a possibility, and the Browns would be highly incentivized to do this. But I also want them to balance the strengths of doing this with the understanding that the price has to be right, which, to be fair to Andrew Berry, outside the Watson trade, which again, very debatable who was in charge of that trade. We still debate it to no end today, but he's usually done a good job of making sure that he's not paying too high of a price for something. Y'all let me know what y'all think in the comment section below. What do you think of Matt Stafford? Do you think it's getting more real, or do you think it's not going to happen? Let me know in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.